two other keywords in your program: science and innovation. This is clearly the only investment with guaranteed returns in the long run. But as clear is the fact that we are not investing enough. My country is an example where other considerations, unfortunately, hamper our investment in this fundamental direction. Part of the responsibility of policymakers is to press for higher investment. Another part of the responsibility of policymakers is to be able to identify the best means to channel some of the best science in the direction of the most challenging issues facing society, to make sure that the best use of this relatively small investment is made. But as a scientist, I would like to point out that too much channeling can be hurtful. Some of the greatest advances have come from unexpected directions, from basic science. What is the best equilibrium? This seems at the heart of the question of academic independence as contrasted to the needs of society. More generally, though, some of the great advances in science have come when people think outside the box. And this is why I'm very much concerned about the role of ethics, which, I mention again, is a matter of context in scientific research too. In the not too distant past, you could get into real trouble if you suggested that the world is round. Yet, think of the ramifications of daring to ask this question. It is all about context, and science itself contributes a great deal to changing the context. We are, unfortunately, too often willing to curb accepted morals when it comes to things such as war and the protection of land, but often conservative when it comes to the most important human endeavor. Closing on this topic, I would like to make one small and polite criticism, if I may. One word that is missing from the program is the word education. Education goes hand in hand with science, innovation, ethics, the whole lot. I stress this bit, this is a political statement, as it is only with the election of George Papandreou as Prime Minister a year ago that the need for unifying policy on research, technology and education was made a priority in Greece. This was exemplified with their being joined under the single umbrella of the Ministry of Education. Another key phrase: global economic governance, global versus local policy. I think that most of us will agree that it is the developed world that is in large part responsible for the ecological and economic crisis that we are facing today. On the global scale, it seems necessary to restructure our approach to growth, development, and industry. Perhaps reconsider some of the amenities that we have so happily become accustomed to over the years. But how easy is it to turn to developing countries and ask of them to restrain themselves with the risk of slowing down their growth? To put it concretely, how easy is to ask of someone in a poor country who is finally at the point of being able to buy a car that he should not drive one? It seems to me that many of the luxuries that have improved the standard of living of much of the developed world are fundamentally dependent on striking asymmetries on the global scale. But, unfortunately, the consequences will be felt by all. Two more key words: sustainable consumption. It is perhaps striking that the economic model that dominates the international scene is so heavily reliant on continual growth. Continuous expansion is required, or else the economy is not healthy. Inevitably, this leads to crises and eventual contractions with devastating effects. This might be the effect of too much deregularization. What will be the effect of careful regularization on such issues? I can't resist but wonder, are there policies, and if so, which are these, that would aim at stable equilibria in this massive game in the mathematical economic sense, instead of greedy strategies? Green economy and infrastructure. Current infrastructure seems to be shaping so much of policy making on green and sustainable development. Recently, there is talk of the possibility of manufacturing hydrogen cars. These would produce water rather than predominantly CO2 and ease the climate change problem. Hydrogen is abundant in nature, and while it needs some processing to extract, the resulting costs are believed to be comparable to those associated with oil. Why aren't all driving those cars then? I suppose that when everything around us, and I don't only mean the cars we drive and machines we operate, revolves around oil, then a switch is much harder than it might seem. Will we have to wait until oil runs out or until ecological damage is massive enough to not be able to ignore? Can we anticipate things and progressively restructure, or will we find ourselves needing to rapidly adapt to total new circumstances? It seems that we have been very able to adapt our environment to our needs, but the opposite is far from clear. Finally, a couple of words in my academic rather than political capacity. As a professor of statistics, I often find myself thinking that one issue that seems to be lurking in many aspects of policy making is the issue of measurement. To be more precise, how to measure impact. Being able to promote good policies is very much reliant on our capacity to convince. Convince not only the policymakers, but citizens themselves on the potential impact of these policies. But first of all, we should be able to convince ourselves. We need to be able to qualify why and how certain policies failed, or by which prior experience policy succeeded. This is by no means an easy statistical problem. In fact, I would say that it's a very challenging one. It seems to me that when designing policies, we rarely stop to think about how we will be able to best assess the output, to evaluate our approach, and either strengthen or modify it. Policy is often based on principles, but principles alone are not enough to ensure that we get the best of what we can. I have, of course, taken the easy way out by offering only vague questions. The hard task I leave to you, and very much look forward to the conclusions you will reach at the end of your meeting. Thank you, and have a fruitful meeting.
Thank you, Minister, for your presentation, which was not a mere welcoming address. You also made some very interesting thoughts, asked questions, and also we took note that the key word education was not mentioned in the title, although may allow me to point out that this goes without saying. It is included, and proof of it is that the presentation made yesterday by Professor Salston brought to the fore the essential role of the university. So this is implied, it is included. The third speaker who will be closing this opening session is a very important man, because on the British side, together with Professor Avgouleas, they have been the driving forces of this important international conference. This man is Professor John Harris, Director of the Institute for Science, Ethics, and Innovation. Professor Harris, the podium is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was expecting an opening speech also from Emilios, so... Thank you. Minister, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here in Athens, and I am very proud of the alliance to which the Minister has just referred between our institute in Manchester, the Institute for Science, Ethics and Innovation, and the Eugenidis Foundation here in Athens. I believe that these sorts of alliances perhaps is a political word, if I may say so, but these sorts of friendships and contacts are hugely important. And I am delighted to be here and regard this meeting as, I hope, the first of many in which the friendship between our institutions will be further cemented. As the president of the Eugenidis Foundation has just said, our children have to be better than us. And that is the theme of my talk this morning. I should also say that I shouldn't be here giving this talk. This was a duty that fell to my friend and colleague, Professor Dan Brock of Harvard University, but unfortunately he was taken ill just before this meeting. So I am very unworthily and inadequately stepping into his shoes. But we all, I know, will wish Dan a speedy recovery. He was taken ill in Geneva while visiting and was unable to travel here to Athens. I wanted to start by taking up a theme that actually seems to be an unexpected theme of this conference. Was referred to by my colleague John Salston yesterday and has come up again this morning. And that is not just the theme of education, but the theme of the openness of our societies to ideas from everywhere, to international ideas. And I have just been reading a wonderful little book by Ernst Gombrich, a very famous art historian, called A Little History of the World. It is a book for school children, which he wrote when he was a very young man.